Are you sad? Scared? Lonely? You feel that reality slips away from you. You unsuccessfully try to overcome some serious loss or failure. It feels like nothing makes sense. Your memories conflict with each other. You don't understand where the real world is. Do you want to talk about it? Well, make yourself comfortable. Our session is about to begin, and the town of Silent Hill is waiting for you. As we remember from the previous video, the transfer of this famous franchise to Double Helix Games was not a very good idea. That's why it was decided to give the work back to Climax developers. The first information declared that the following part was about to be released on Wii platform from Nintendo, and was supposed to be named Silent Hill Cold Heart. The main character was a psychology student who was supposed to fight monsters, keep an eye on her body temperature, look for food and clothes. Everything sounded alluring and interesting. But at some point the plans changed completely, and from that time the project had to be called Silent Hill Shattered Memories. This game appeared in stores on December 8th, as it was promised on Wii platform. But in less than a couple of months it was ported to PlayStation 2 and PlayStation Portable. Of course, the developers had to adapt Wii controls for PlayStation systems, and in case of PSP, had to cut the graphics pretty hard. But the change of name led to more changes that we could imagine. The main character changed, the concept changed, everything changed. Since now it's not a continuation of Silent Hill, but a creative adaptation of the first part. But you shouldn't take Shattered Memories for a complete remake, like what happened to Resident Evil, for example. That's exactly a creative interpretation, so the gameplay and plot concepts will be different from the first game. And before examining the plot, I would like to point out one detail. In the beginning of the game, players can see an interesting warning. It says that the game will create your psychological profile and create a personal nightmare based on it. Beg your pardon for tautology, but the game plays you as much as you play it. Sounds intriguing and even dangerous, but don't build illusions about this statement. Shattered Memories doesn't have any impact on your state of mind. But the developers don't lie to us. And while playing, collect the data about a player intensively, so this way, some elements and details in the game can change. So while retelling the plot, I will concentrate only on the main or fundamental events, and only after that tell you about possible changes. It all starts from this scene where our protagonist comes to a psychologist, whose role is played by a familiar Michael Kaufman. He makes an accent that other specialists didn't help you, but this time everything will be different. We'll have to start from the beginning in order to understand what happened. To start recollecting all things that led a player to this place. This psychological session will be performed through the whole game. The game will throw us from the memories, the main plot, and Dr. Kaufman's office, where he'll be asking a player hardball questions, making players pass simple but questionable tests, and make conclusions based on the answers. But these episodes will be examined aside from the main plot in order to make the narration fluent.
Let's get started then.
The story starts from Harry Mason, who got into an accident on the skirts of the town of Silent Hill. After clearing his head, he remembers that he had his daughter Cheryl with him, who's not in the car anymore. He grabs a flashlight and decides to look after her. After entering the town, he sees it in tatters. There are no people, shops are abandoned, and only the street lamps and banners lights make it clear that it's not a ghost town. After wandering around, Harry will enter a fast food joint and meet a familiar face, Sybil Bennet. Of course, Harry comes for a police officer this very second to ask for help to find his missing daughter. But she cools down. Our worrying father checks his documents and finds out that Harry Mason lives in Silent Hill.
Harry Mason, Levin Street.
And it's possible that in this blizzard his daughter could just simply go home. But the protagonist doesn't remember that he lives in the city and doesn't know his address, but thinks that it may be just the consequences of the car crash. And he decides to go back home. But it turns out not that easy. At one moment he gets a call and recognizes Cheryl. She didn't say anything about where she was, just warned her dad that he couldn't fight and told him to run. At first we don't understand what she was talking about, but after the conversation the world starts to freeze over and some awful creatures start to show up. And since he cannot fight them, there is only one option: to run as fast as he can through the frozen maze with the hope that these monsters don't kill him. And it actually helps. As soon as a player reaches the final destination, the environment melts down and monsters disappear. When the protagonist reaches his usual address, he doesn't discover his daughter there. Besides, there is even another family there, and they claim that they've been living there for 14 years. Harry doesn't believe them and shouts at the owner, so they have to close the door and leave him outside. After a while, Sybil will arrive and offer him drive to the police station in order to find out why Harry has an old address in his documents.
These people don't have your daughter. Trust me. If she's missing, we will find her.
But on their way to the station, they get caught by a snowstorm, and snow sticks to all windows on the car. Sybil goes out to check the situation on the road, but never comes back. After a while, Harry goes out of the car and decides to continue looking for his daughter on his own. He'll have to go through the forest, boat station, hunting seat, and again run away from monsters in a frozen nightmare. And in the end of all this, he will find the building of Midwich School. Here Sybil will call and ask him to meet him in the gym, that is usually used as a shelter for emergency situations. And he decides that his daughter also could go there.
Emergency shelter? Well, maybe Cheryl was taken there.
But when Harry gets there, he doesn't find neither his daughter nor Sybil, but he finds a singer, Michelle Waldes, who's come there for a college reunion.
You were always on my mind. You were always on my mind.
Sorry if I interrupted you. I'm looking for an emergency shelter.
And the most amazing thing is that she knows Cheryl. She says that Cheryl was her schoolmate and even shows a photograph of her as a proof.
There is a resemblance, but my Cheryl's just a kid.
You don't sound so sure. Come on.
Certainly Harry does not believe her, since his Cheryl is only 7 years old and she cannot be that lady in the picture. In order to make sure, they decide to break into director's office and check the database. And it turns out Michelle was right. She is the Cheryl Mason, but somehow she's become 18 years older. In one of the records, he finds out that his daughter changed her address and moved to the other side of the town. He decides to go that way, but first he has to run away from monsters again. Michelle decides to help Harry reach the necessary address. Together they go to Balcon Club. where Michelle works as a singer. There they were supposed to take a car and go, but everything ended up with a different scenario. Michelle disappears and a defiantly dressed woman appears instead of her, who definitely knows Harry, but he can't remember her. From the dialogue we understand that they were close and even slept together, which seems nonsense to Harry. Another discovery is waiting to be revealed. Her name is Dahlia. I think all people who played the original game have a cognitive dissonance right now. And believe me, this won't be the last one. Anyway, Dahlia decides to give Harry a lift and rides him to the destination. And again, everything goes the wrong way. The environment again changes on the bridge. Harry's companion freezes, the bridge is being destroyed, and car falls down into the river. Somehow Harry manages to escape the vehicle and passes out after reaching the shore, and regains consciousness in Alchemilla Hospital. Sybil helps him. She says that they need to discuss a certain thing she found in the police office while studying the case of Harry Mason. But the dialogue will be delayed because another cold nightmare will chase our heroes down.
When I was at the station, I pulled the file on Harry Mason.
So? No!
When reality comes back to normal, Harry will meet a nurse who had an accident on the ambulance car. This character is also familiar to us, Lisa. She asks Harry to see her safely home and after taking some pills decides to rest. And Harry continues his mission to find Cheryl. But in a few minutes Lisa calls back Harry and says she doesn't feel well and that Harry should immediately come back. But after coming back we realize that it's already too late. The girl is dead.
Lisa?
And in this extremely bad moment, Sybil runs into the room, points a gun at Harry and charges him of murder. He tries to explain himself, tries to say he is innocent, but the police officer doesn't believe him, and before everything freezes again, she says a very interesting phrase. "You are not Harry Mason."
I didn't.
Shut up! I know you're not Harry Mason!
After escaping the inevitable arrest, Harry finally reaches the place he saw in the school computer. There he meets Dahlia, who is not only able to leave a drowning car, but also has become older, much older. And that's not the most unexpected discovery, as we find out that these two were married, and Cheryl is their daughter.
We're soulmates, you and I. For richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health.
You're my wife?
After another nightmare, Harry gets into his daughter's room, and after not finding her, lies on her bed in despair and falls asleep. After some time, Michelle will enter the room and wake him up. Harry will remember Dahlia's words that Cheryl's probably in the lighthouse. That's why he has to go there right away. Michelle offers Harry to give him a lift. Besides, her boyfriend in the car is waiting for her. On their way, the couple will suddenly quarrel with each other, and Harry will be left in the car alone. Without any desire to know the end of this conflict, he goes down into the sewers and goes to the lighthouse. But he is destined to meet Michelle one more time on his way. She'll be drinking in one of the bars. What else has she got to do? She had a serious fight with her boyfriend, and probably for good.
Are you sure you want to go, Harry?
That's all I got.
She gives Harry a hint that the easiest way to get to the lighthouse is going by boat that's floating near the pier right after the lakeside amusement park. And he finds Dahlia on the boat, young again. Harry doesn't understand what's been happening around him, but asks Dahlia only about one thing, to get to the lighthouse. But since the trip will take some time, they decided to pass the time with sex.
Better, huh?
After waking up, Harry finds Dahlia frozen again, but anyway, the lighthouse is really close. That's why he jumps onto a frozen lake and begins to run towards the light. A big number of monsters start to appear, not allowing him to reach the destination, but in the time when Harry was almost powerless, all the enemies freeze for some reason. The ice under Harry's legs breaks down, and he has to reach the lighthouse by swimming. It was too hard for him to do this on his own though. But Sybil's here to save the day. Being afraid of their arrest, our protagonist grabs her gun and asks her to get out of the way. But she didn't want to stand on his way. She's really amazed by such a strong determination of Harry to find his daughter. She truly believes that the hero is Harry Mason. But there is one thing. In his personal records, Sybil found out that Harry Mason died in a car crash 18 years ago.
But I think you are telling the truth. I believe you think you're Harry Mason. Hell, I believe you are Harry Mason. But Harry Mason was killed in a car crash 18 years ago. You want answers? I guess they're waiting in there.
There's a critical number of questions already. But all the answers can be found there, in the lighthouse. A player enters the building to find out what the story will turn out to be like, what ending is waiting for him behind the last door. But now, I'll save the intrigue and switch off from the main plot, in order to tell you about some gameplay features. But hold your horses and don't get mad. Without knowing some gameplay features, the ending will not be so full and clear. Well, as you have noticed, the gameplay is completely different from the previous games. In a lot of ways, it was due to the specification of Wii controller, which could track players' movements. So this time we were able to control the flashlight Harry was holding. This way we move camera, turn around, and concentrate our attention on anything that caught our interest. Also, we could open doors, push buttons, grab some things and manipulate them in order to solve some puzzles. Forget about the inventory, about weapons, medical kits, and all that stuff. Keys from different locations is maximum you're going to carry around. Also, as you could guess, the stages with monsters and without them are strictly separated. Monsters appear only when the world freezes and after melting disappear. But we'll talk about it a bit later. Now I would like to return back to Dr. Kaufman's office in order to enlighten this game element. I'm pretty sure to say that not all of you, my dear audience, have ever visited a psychotherapist. But probably most of you could see such things in movies. Shattered Memories will give you the chance to take on the role of a patient and observe all beauties and wonders of this process in first person. Here the doctor slips into deliberation of such vague concepts as guilt, happiness, love, sex and family. And that he asks some leading questions and gives some abstract tests afterwards, which seems even not so relevant. And players will have to take this hands-on approach in order to formulate a psychological profile, which cardinally influences the changes in the main part of the game. That's the things I've been leading to. Before examining the endings, we have to take a much closer look at such a thing as psychological profile. It's compiled of 5 parameters: friendliness, family, lie, sexuality, and alcohol. At first, these parameters are equal to 0, but they will increase as we play the game. Right in the beginning, Dr. Kaufman will offer you a special test that will formulate the very first profile. For example, if you chose the variant that alcohol helps you to relax, +1 to alcohol. You always listen to other people's feelings, +1 to friendliness. Never cheated on a partner, +1 to family, and so on.
Never cheated on a partner? Really? Okay.
Although this test will set the vector of development only in the beginning of the game, since you will visit Dr. Kaufman's office not once or not twice for another portion of tests. It usually happens after stages with nightmares. Here are some examples. In this test, players have to split pictures into 2 categories, where a person in a picture is sleeping and where a person is dead. Or create 3 couples of given people. Or some abstract pictures, which should be divided into categories, those which seem sexual to a player and non-sexual. And the thing is that there is no correct answer to these questions. You perform all these actions according to your guesses and intuition, and exactly these decisions influence the changes in your profile. Called all pictures sexual, it means that you're probably an oversexed person. But you can go against the therapy itself. Not to look at the doctor, give controversial answers, for example that you don't like alcohol but everyone called you a heavy drinker at school. Give incorrect answers in tests, unite people in couples of the same sex, and other things. All these things influence the last scale, the scale of lie. This scale represents your reserved character and your desire to hide your true psychological profile. But those sessions is not the only thing that change the scales. The actions that players perform also influence the profile. If you fasten your eyes on erotic posters, nude mannequins, used condoms and breasts of the women you were talking to, don't be surprised that the sex scale will be increasing. The same thing with alcohol. Don't miss a chance to look at any bottle, your scale will change then. You got the idea, I guess. And the main point is that there is no chance to look at your current state. There is no special menu where you can see that you have, for example, this number of points for family, this number of friendliness, etc. So you would ask, why the hell do I need this profile for? How do I know that my scale has become this or that? And here's the answer. Depending on players' preferences, some details in the game will change that will show the current path and the ending he's about to end with. The Facade of Locations. The appearance of characters and their behavior, dialogues, monsters and the outfit of the protagonist are subjects that can change. If you're a friendly person, you'll have easy talks with all NPC and you'll never be involved in a conflict. Sex scale will influence the appearance of women characters and their sexy outfits. I'll tell you about other changes a bit further as the text goes, cause it's high time we started discussing the endings. Because now you know from which parts the finale consists of. So Harry Mason enters the lighthouse, approaches one of the doors, and then a player is transferred once again to Dr. Kaufman's office. The doctor hands down his opinion that the therapy has faced a dead end. All those tests, all conclusions that he could come up from them. All this doesn't make any sense. 18 years of denial of a banal fact that father is dead, it's a clinical case. What can a child know about a father at 7 years old? Rather small pieces of information, and when he dies, you don't come up with the only true decision. You deny his death and create an image of him in your head from those snippets of information you remember about him. But this image is not complete, not real. The image of a person who never lived and existed. Without accepting the reality, you still believe that this person is still alive, although he's just in your head. Many people already understand what's been happening here. And then, the main plot twist of the game happens. Harry Mason enters the room.
Your dad wasn't a hero. Wasn't your knight in shining armor. He was a human being. You never knew him. And you never will.
And we find out that all this time not Harry attended at the session, but Cheryl. He really died in a car crash 18 years ago, but his daughter refused to accept it. She created an image of him in her head and believed that he'd been looking for her with all his might. But since she didn't know her father well, she created him from all those tiny pieces of memories, adding the wholes with her own personality. That's why her psychological profile has been making changes in the story of Harry. Because she added pieces of her own individuality in his image. But finally, everything's fallen into place. The only thing is waiting to be revealed. Did the session help or not? Did Cheryl understand that her father exists only in her imagination? There are 3 answers to this.
You need to live your life. Cheryl.
In the first case, a player should concentrate on scales of family and friendship. Cheryl tells Harry that he's been with her for so long, and he replies that he always will be. After that, ice freezes Harry, remaining the memory of him forever. After that, Cheryl goes out from the office and meets her mother Dahlia, and together they go home. She's accepted the death of her father, but she'll keep the memory of him. If a player was not so friendly, the meeting would go not so well. Through tears, Cheryl asks her dad, why did he have to die? Harry tries to touch her shoulder, but she pushes away his hand. He asks her to forget about him, and after that symbolically shiver into pieces, letting players know that she erased all memories about this person. At last, if you don't pay attention to therapy and keep increasing the lie scale, Cheryl will say that her father is a hero, that Harry who died was not her actual father. That was not the person she remembered according to the memories in her head. Harry replies that he's not even a ghost, and hugs his daughter. He doesn't turn to ice, doesn't fall into pieces. He stays with Cheryl. Since she was not paying a proper attention to this therapy, the doctor couldn't help her. And she'll continue living in her imaginary world with her imaginary dad she created herself. It seems like the end, but no. The thing is that there are 2 global endings in Shattered Memories. I've described you the variants of the first one above. Now it's time for the second one. But first I would like to return right to the beginning of the game, to the main menu where players could observe the family videotape, where alive Harry and little Cheryl were spending time together. They were going to the amusement park and making pictures of each other. But it's only the beginning of the tape, and it also has an end. And these 4 endings are the part of the second global ending. And again, if you concentrate on the scales of family and friendship, we can see Harry and Dahlia discussing their marriage, and that it can go like this. They will have to break up, and Cheryl sees all that. When Harry sees it, he comes closer and says that she shouldn't blame herself, and despite the fact that her parents have to break up, they still love her.
Even though Mom and Dad don't love each other anymore, we both love you. And we always will. Oh, come on.
If you concentrate more on the sex scale, we'll be able to see how Harry is cheating on his wife with Michelle and Lisa. Girls ask him whether he will dedicate his next book to them. And he says no, because he dedicates his books only to his wife and daughter. And it sounds more like a cruel joke than attention to his family.
Can we be in your next book?
Sure.
Can you dedicate it to us?
No. Dedications are always to my wife and daughter. It's only fair.
If you based your walkthrough on the scale of unfriendliness, then Dahlia will make a scene. That her husband is an empty place, pathetic, and no one reads his novels. And as a proof to her words, she slaps him over and over. After that, Harry's glasses fall on the floor, and when he tries to pick them up, he sees Cheryl, who was taping this scene. He bashfully looks away without saying a word. Finally, the fourth ending is based on the alcohol scale. In this case, Cheryl will find her dad on the front porch, who behaves typically for a boozer. He behaves funny, sings something, and after that shouts at daughter and demands to bring another bottle of alcohol.
No wonder I drink with a family like this.
After the tape is over, you will be able to see the titles where Dr. Kaufman will be explaining his observations about his patient in more depth. Of course, the text will change depending on the ending. As well as the final song. If Cheryl realizes the death of her dad, players would hear the melody called Acceptance. If not, players would hear the song called Hell Frozen Rain. Now at last let's talk about mechanics. Game mechanics, of course. I already described it to you above, but still let's take a closer look. If someone thinks that Silent Hill has turned into a meditative journey with a flashlight, then you're right. But besides a flashlight, Harry has a mobile phone, which has a lot of functions. First of all, you can use it for calling. What a surprise, huh? You can call some specific characters, or dial different numbers you can find in the game, on different banners, prints, and other things. There are many numbers in this game actually, and after dialing each of them, Harry will have a conversation, either with another person or an answering machine. And depending on the profile settings, these dialogues may change as well. Here I would also like to point out the specification of Wii controller, which could be held as a phone headset while calling. And it works perfectly. Also touches the echo messages. These are messages which are imprisoned in different items. When a player is close to such messages, his flashlight starts to blink. Static noise can be heard from the speakers and growing stronger as long as you get closer to the object. When you reach the object, all this will end and Harry will receive a voice message or SMS. Sometimes even with a picture in it. Sometimes player will have to take a picture of barely seen silhouette in order to get the message. But why do you need these messages? Well, sometimes they may contain a clue to solving a puzzle, but mostly they don't contain anything important and only create an additional background. The same things we can say about memento items, but you can only look at them and rotate as hard as you like. Also, there is a map in the phone where you can even draw different notes. Sometimes it can help while running away from monsters, but it's not that easy and convenient to use it while running in panic, and the detailization doesn't allow you to make a route properly. As I've reached the theme about running, let's talk about this aspect, since it's the only challenging aspect of the game. You have to run through the doors in a maze which have a blue shining. But sometimes you can run through the wrong way and get lost in these similar looking locations. The main difficulty is that in these moments monsters will be hunting you down. They chase the protagonist, catch and hang on him. And the longer they hang, the more life points they'll be able to take. That's why you have to sip him off as soon as possible. In order to do that, you have to move your Wiimote in the direction where a monster is hanging. Sometimes you can hide in the closets on the levels, but they will get you out of there sooner or later. While running, you can throw different objects behind you, making the monsters move slower. And if everything goes really bad, you may find a flare and light it up. Then for some time you'll be safe. Sometimes players will face some simple quests, but in my opinion all those runs are more annoying than interesting or frightening. In many cases you can blame the controls. While swinging your Wiimote all over the place, it's really easy to lose the way. Turn to another way and lose your orientation on the field. Sometimes monsters don't fall no matter how hard you swing your controller, or you can get stuck in the textures instead of going through the door. Besides, there is no variation of monsters besides the ones who jump on you. There are some kinds of shadows on the levels like in the very first Silent Hill. As well as there, they perform a function of decoration and do not scare or harm players. Yes, depending on your scale, the monsters could change their appearance, but those are only cosmetic changes. They do not become stronger and do not start using other attacks, for example. And as I have touched the theme of changes depending on the scales, let's talk about them. First of all, the versions of characters. Sybil, for example, has 3 forms: unfriendly, friendly, and sexy. But there is a chance that the diner can be closed and Harry will have to go through the nearest pub. Harry will meet a manager there and still she will lead Harry the way he needs to go. There can be different types of pub as well, by the way. Then we have Harry's house, and here situation is a bit more interesting. Before going there, a player could receive a task from Dr. Kaufman to color up one picture with a couple of people, house, car, and garage in it. And depending on the colors that were used, players will see the exact same house with exact same colors later. Well, not exactly the same, of course, but the base colors for sure. Also, there are 3 versions of Michelle and Dahlia, both young and old, by the way. Even Harry himself will change his standard outfit for one of 4 costumes, which will be the hint at the ending. Besides that, some locations could change too, like the Hunt in the Forest, Bordello, School Gym, the inside of Balkan Club, Lombardo, Cinema, Boat, some signs, posters, statues, and many other things. If you give Lisa a wrong pill, she'll be dead when Harry comes back to her place. And if Harry gave her the right one, she'll suffer a bit longer. Also, the quarrel between Michelle and her boyfriend. Either she breaks up with him or he does. And these are only the major changes, because it's really hard to notice and describe everything. By the way, in comparison with the very first game, there are a lot of changes in this one too. But there are also things that repeat themselves. Let's take a look. In both games, a player meets Sybil in a diner. In both games, we'll visit school, to the elementary school in the first game, and to the high school in Shattered Memories. We met Dahlia for the first time in Balkan Church. And here he meets her in Balkan Club. Then he checks into hospital and sees how Lisa dies with blood on her face. You can even add Sybil here, who points a gun at Harry. And of course the final way to the lighthouse, which includes a trip through the sewers and a boat. After the second walkthrough, you can also find the ending with aliens. In order to get it, players have to take 13 pictures of alien ships around the city, and then, well, you should look at this yourself, I think.
This is it? After all we've said, all we've discussed, you honestly believe that your father was abducted by aliens? It made more sense when you were talking about cults and demons.
This whole town, it's really a giant spaceship.
James?
Wrong day again?
See you tomorrow, James. One of my couples therapy patients. Haven't seen his wife in a while. Where were we?
My mother was a bitch.
Go on. I'm listening.
All in all, there are plenty of similar elements in the game. Of course, all those adventures of Harry Mason were happening to wonderful compositions of Akira Yamaoka and Mary Elizabeth McGinn. And unfortunately, this is the last part, when Maestro took part in the creation of a soundtrack. After that, he left Konami to Grasshopper Manufacture, in order to create a soundtrack for Shadow of the Damned with Shinji Mikami, creator of Resident Evil. What a duo it is, don't you think? A wonderful composer and a person responsible for Resident Evil working together. And it's also symbolical that Akira worked with music from the very first Silent Hill and ended his work on a remake. What can I tell in the end? Shattered Memories got really good reviews both from critics and players, but can we really call it the official successor of Silent Hill? It's not really a horror game anymore. It's like a thriller or disturbing walk, which is good on one way, but the atmosphere and the sense of horror are completely different. It's better to look at this game as a spin-off in my opinion. If you look at this game this way, I can call it really, really good and even original. All these things with psychological profile, different elements that can change, and psychotherapy haven't been used in such a way anywhere else. And this game is worth playing. I guess that's all for now. We're coming closer to the end, but we'll still spend some time together. Thank you for your attention. See you soon, in a couple of weeks.